Okay, so here we start the November 42 turn. I rolled the weather. It ends up poor. I can't summarize what that does without piecing it together from all the different places. Now, this is important not just in terms of someone like me having a headache trying to find something I want except by the path that the designer shows, but it's also a problem because if I want to think about the game and strategize about the game in any sense, I must follow that path, which is to say I have to hunt it down through all these tables in order to find out what the effects are, or in all the places. When there's no single summary of something like this, it means I can't just look it up and think about the game in the kind of way that would allow me to make good decisions. So the only way to learn this game is to play it multiple times, which is something I don't like to do much. So, you know, I'm not even walking away necessarily with terribly good grasp of what all the modifiers are, etc., because I only see them in the moment from the ground level. And that means that even after one play, I'm having some or even as I'm in the midst of a play, I'm having some difficulty kind of grasping what I would do differently if I played it again, which I would likely do if I was having that kind of grasp, but instead I'm kind of not. So it's an interesting making certain choices to pare the rules down to the absolute minimum, put as much as you can just in the charts, etc. It does lead to some interesting choices that maybe, you know, a fan will rewrite the rules or something, but it definitely affects the overall attractiveness for some of us. Okay, so I opened things up with some air sorties to air strikes to finish off this thing, and it actually took two. The first one was quite effective. The second one ended up a wash with both sides losing, but that knocks the Russian unit out in terms of making them. But I still got a problem. This guy's got a lot more sorties than I do, and I don't have an easy way to deal with him. In fact, with my penalty, I can't even really airstrike him. I'd have to move forward and spend another sortie to do that. Anyway, I activated the Italians, used the ground support, and that ended up, against this unit, they ended up with a -1, -2 for, probably forgot weather in there somewhere. Yeah, the hell with it. Yeah, there's an additional -2 for the poor weather. Really unlikely to succeed because I'm just likely to grab an asterisk if those modifiers are all in place. Anyway, it would have been a -1 to minus lots, and the first roll didn't work. The second roll was even less likely and didn't work either. I don't want to try to resolve what the actual effects are. You know, keeping all these modifiers is a difficult thing. Definitely would need to be studying the player aid charts constantly to play this, and that's hard when you got the counters on it. But you know, it's just it's a tough way to play for me. You really kind of have to have them memorized to be able to start thinking in terms of the game correctly. All right, and let's see. I don't know what else to do with the Axis. You know, I've got a lot of points to spend, but all the attacks seem kind of iffy at best. And you can kind of see where it is because of the organization of just a column of lots and lots of numbers. So, for example, poor terrain. Well, I didn't realize it's only attacking that affects poor terrain. Normally it's attacking and defending seem to be modifying things. For example, the tank or whatever. Well, here it's just attacking, just like with the terrain. Again, these things where there's kind of a learning curve. I applied it correctly here. The Germans stormed across, managed to isolate a Russian unit and strike up. The Russians threw a sortie in, actually, but it did not help them in terms of saving that unit. And now I've got the Germans kind of set up to cause problems to these Russian units, perhaps. We'll see. Alright, and I don't know what the Germans did anymore. They made another attack here on these Russian armor. Here's the problem. I went through this list a couple of times, and it's really hard doing arithmetic for me. The tracks are helpful, I guess, but trying to keep it in my head, I lose track of things. Trying to follow this is just even more annoying, because not only do I lose track of things, I forget which line I'm on. It's much easier when I can keep it in my head. But when I came up with the final odds, and there was a Russian airstrike, and they threw their artillery in, it was pretty bad for the Germans. It looks like +1 to +5, I think. Anyway, that just resulted in an AS. It's really hard to get painful results for the attacker itself, the attacker eliminated result. And of course, that's just a step loss for the attacker. Anyway, having a hard time figuring out a way to eliminate this unit, especially with that -2 attacking in poor weather. That's really rough. I moved some Romanians up, but I feel like, you know, I've spent enough points, as it were, on my attacks already. Really, I think I'm not going to spend any more German points. Well, wait a minute. Now 3 is all I have to spare here, so I've got 3 more points I've kind of got to spend, because I don't have any lost units. Alright. Okay, so I've gone back to just trying to remember the numbers in my head. Probably got them wrong, but anyway, the Germans made an attack here, finished this thing out. They're down to the 3 points they want to save. Everybody's in supply, which means I'm going to hand things over to the Russian turn. And the way the Russians worked things, well, they just really moved a unit down in order to help cover their line. Now the problem with that is they had 10 points to spend. They spent 1 to move here. They basically had 2 units, either of which they could have brought in. Oh, the leg unit's cheaper. Hold on. Right? Yeah. So I can bring in the reduced ground unit and spend the extra point to bring in this reduced leg unit, which I'm not sure where to put. Since it's cheaper, I'm gonna put it closer to the line. That's a shock army. It gets a slight advantage when the weather's nice. It's not as good as my infantry, though, overall. Anyway, the biggie for me, though, was get those air sorties up, and same for the Germans. That's the only thing they spent on. The problem is, I think that these modifiers in this system do a really, really good job of representing everything. It's just, it's very difficult for me. Anyway, let's see where our... we got an upgrade. I can motorize something else. You know, I don't want to. Here's why. As long as the weather is crappy, no, guards. Whoa, guards always and shock always produce a +1. No, they're kind of good. Yeah. Alright, I'll upgrade. I didn't realize that because it's split into 2 places, guards or shock unit. And then the tanks are different, but the shock unit defending in fair weather gets an additional +1. So it's actually as good as a tank, which I don't think I've done. I don't know. Maybe. Where do I want to put my armor, if that's the case? I don't know. They get a slight advantage defending here. I'll put them here and improve that unit. And this actually goes in the bag because it's just gone now. And we didn't win. The turn marker moves and more units get flushed down. Now, what's kind of interesting in this next turn is that we're going to see increased Soviet production. Because once we hit December 42, they get 2 extra base production points. Alright. We'll start a new turn. Okay, so we enter the December 42 turn. We're coming close to the end here, actually. If I hadn't gotten distracted by the election, I would have been done last night easily. Anyway, rolled up the weather. We have poor weather again. That's bad, I think, once more for the Axis, because they're the ones who need to gain something. And as time goes on, the Soviets are just going to increase and increase and increase. So there's no real... They don't have any pressure. They currently have, I believe, more cities. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 1, 2, 3, 4 for the Germans, it looks like. On the other hand, I think the Soviets have the overall advantage at this point, just in terms of they've got a lot of troops on the board, but their troops aren't as effective as the Germans still. There's that big +2 on Germans in either air or ground combat. We got some, well, the Axis has their ground support marker again, but for the Russians, they picked up their partisans, which they can simply put down in a hex and get... enforce an additional -2 on a hex that they're attacking, for whatever that's worth. Anyway, production-wise, the Russian production's holding steady at 12 because they lost Grozny, but they got the increase for the turn that I was just talking about earlier. Alright, let's see what the Germans can do, and if they can gain any ground. Well, so far I've done a couple of assault attacks, one across here using Italian support, one up here with Allied support, and then one down here that was actually a mobile attack. No traction at all. The poor weather is harming things greatly. I did spend, we had the airstrikes canceling out the Russian airplanes. I'm not even sure that makes sense, but I kind of can't attack while they have planes available, but they got this one no matter what. But over here, I did manage to use up one of their airplanes. They've got a tanks unit they should have probably used to defend this space instead. That would have been a wise move for them. But maybe they'll use it offensively. I'm not sure. Airstrikes are more expensive than the armor. The armor is a 1 use for a +1, but it comes back next turn. The airstrike, they have to pay some production points to recover. So, but I have one more German point I want to spend, so I'm going to get to make an infantry attack somewhere, I guess. Probably here. Just a mobile attack. I am not seeing much value to it, though. It's probably going to fail. While the Russians didn't expend any resources defending that, the Germans have given up their turn. They actually took an attacker attrition result, really bad result here. I think it was a 1-6, and ended up no modifiers, I think. If I guessed right, I'm trying to remember these. But basically the +2 for the German versus -2 for poor weather. I don't know if anything else was in effect there. I don't think so. This is the first time I think there's been a German unit damaged, and it's at a bad time. I don't have an extra point that I could not spend to use that. I want to get my air power up. That's going to be a penalty for them if I can remember on defense, which they may suffer. There was something else I wanted to think of, and I can't remember what. I don't know. Anyway, I'm a little worried about this guy not getting isolated, but being left with nowhere to retreat to by some sort of combined attack. We'll see how that works, but there's a lot of Russian units up here and a lot of Russian points. There's a Romanian point I have left, but I don't have an obvious use for it. This attack is at bad odds. So that's going to be kind of painful. And the Russians spent a lot of points kind of foolishly pushing this German unit aside, isolating this one, dropping a partisans in here. Now one thing they're going to get is a No, they're not, because that was in supply. I thought they were going to get a low supply marker on that German. They're not going to. They managed to reduce the German unit. Now, at the end of the Russian turn, we roll for this, and that's going to be back in 2 turns. So I do get the partisans back at some point. It didn't work out as well as I had hoped. Final die roll could have worked out better, but I threw in 1 sortie, but I want to save 1 for next turn because I only have enough points to buy back the 2 sorties here. Alternatively, of course, I could buy them here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But I can't cover everything, and I'd like to force the Germans to try to counteract my sorties because I think I'm more on the offensive than they are. Now, their range 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 doesn't quite reach here, but it's pretty large, so you might start seeing the Germans playing more defensively and actually saving their sorties for defensive plays. And while the Germans didn't even buy back their sorties, they bought their armor and an infantry unit back up to full strength. They can do this even though he's actually isolated because he made it through the supply segment, so the reinforcements are assumed to have gotten there in time. For the Russians, they bought up their sorties and also grabbed themselves an additional infantry unit. You might want to be upgrading some of these damaged units that they have. They have this one. I thought this one was damaged, but it doesn't appear to be anymore. It's hard to tell. I'm always flipping these accidentally because they're not full stock and it's not a full board. But that's just me. Let's see. We don't have anything dropping down. It looks to me like the game's not over. So we just move forward into another turn. And I'll load this one.